The stars over the battlefield flickered like dying candles. Smoke rose from shattered ships, broken weapons, and scattered bodies. The air still carried the bitter taste of burned metal and blood. Among the wreckage, one man stood slowly, his chest rising and falling with effort. His shirt was torn open, and across his chest ran a scar that glowed faintly in the starlight. He pressed a hand over it as if the wound still ached, though years had passed since it had been carved into his flesh. His name was Daniel. To many, he was just another human soldier, lost in the war between his kind and the alien empire. But there was something different about him, something hidden in that scar that others could not see. He had never spoken of it, not even to his closest brothers in arms. Tonight, standing in the ruins of what once had been a proud city, he felt the past pulling him closer than ever before. The enemy had retreated, but not far. Their banners still glowed in the distance, tall and defiant. He knew they would regroup. The war was not finished. Yet Daniel's eyes were drawn away from the battlefield, away from the screams and cries, and toward the temple that still stood untouched among the destruction. It was there that whispers called to him, whispers he thought he had buried long ago. He moved slowly, his boots crunching on broken stone, his body heavy from exhaustion. Soldiers on both sides had fled, too broken to fight. The temple doors loomed over him, carved with strange runes that pulsed faintly as he approached. He had seen them once before, many years ago, when he was young and reckless. That was the day he had gained the scar across his chest, the day everything changed. He had sworn never to return, and yet here he was. Inside the temple, the air was cold and heavy. Shadows stretched along the tall walls, and statues of forgotten kings stood watching. At the far end of the hall, a light shimmered, soft and alive like the glow of moonlight on water. Daniel's steps slowed as he saw her. She stood tall, her skin a deep shade of green that seemed to glow under the temple's light. Her long silver hair fell like a river over her armored shoulders, and on her head rested a crown shaped like flames of gold. Her eyes locked onto him the moment he entered, sharp and bright, carrying both anger and sorrow. She was the alien queen, ruler of the empire his people had fought for generations. To most, she was only a legend of cruelty and power. But to Daniel, she was something far more dangerous. Her lips parted, but no sound came for a long moment. She stepped closer, her presence filling the hall, her gaze never leaving his chest. Her voice, when it came, was soft yet heavy, as if she carried the weight of centuries. "That scar," she whispered. "So it was you." After all these years, Daniel froze. He had faced death more times than he could count, but her words struck deeper than any blade. She knew the scar. She recognized it. Somehow the mark that had haunted him was tied to her. His breath caught in his throat as her hand lifted, delicate yet commanding, pointing toward the wound on his chest. "Do you even know what you carry?" she asked, her voice echoing through the silent temple. Daniel's mind raced. Memories of fire, of a night long ago when he had been dragged half dead from ruins by soldiers, flashed before him. He had never understood why the wound refused to heal properly, why it glowed under certain lights. Now, looking at her eyes, he understood there was a truth he had never been told. And in that moment, he realized the war he thought he knew was only the beginning. Daniel's pulse quickened as he stood before the queen. He had expected a fight, perhaps even death the moment he stepped into the temple. Instead, her eyes searched him like someone looking for a ghost, as if she were staring at a piece of the past she could not believe was real. The soldiers outside, the battle raging across worlds, all of it faded in that moment. There was only her voice and the scar she had named. She moved closer, her golden crown catching the light. Her hand hovered just above his chest, the air between her fingers and his skin crackling faintly with energy. Daniel wanted to step back, but his legs refused. He felt as if unseen chains held him in place. He clenched his jaw, trying to gather his words, but the silence stretched heavy. "You don't remember?" she said at last, her tone sharp yet trembling at the edges. "The night of fire, the night when the temple burned. You were there. You touched the stone that was never meant for human hands, and it marked you." Her words sent a shiver through him. He did remember the fire, the ruins, the night that had changed everything. He had thought it was a nightmare of war, just another wound from a battle he had been too young to survive. But the way she spoke made it clear there was more. He had not simply been unlucky. He had been chosen, or cursed. Daniel drew in a slow breath. "Why do you care about a scar on me?" he asked, his voice steady but low. I'm just a soldier. Nothing more. The Queen's eyes flashed. Nothing more? She shook her head, her silver hair glimmering like steel. That mark is not a scar. It is a seal. And it was not meant for you. It belongs to my people, to my bloodline. Yet somehow it lives on you. He felt the weight of her words press into him. A seal, a mark not meant for humans. His chest ached as if the wound remembered its origin. His mind spun with questions, but one thought rose above the rest. If what she said was true, then his life had been tied to hers long before this war had begun. Her voice softened, almost breaking. I searched for decades. I thought it was lost. I thought he was lost. She stopped as if the memory pained her. Then she looked back at him, eyes filled with both fury and something else he couldn't name. And now you stand before me, a human with what should never be his. Daniel's hand pressed against the scar again, heat pulsing beneath his palm. The air in the temple felt heavy, charged. He wanted answers, but every word from her only left more questions. Still, he forced himself to meet her gaze. If it wasn't meant for me, then why am I still alive? Her lips parted, but before she could answer, a sudden crash echoed from outside. The temple doors rattled as shouts filled the night. Enemy soldiers were returning, their voices sharp with anger. Daniel turned his head toward the sound, but when he looked back at her, he saw no fear in her face. She stood tall, her expression hardening, her crown gleaming like a weapon. You will not leave this place until you know the truth, she said firmly. Even if the galaxy burns, you will stay. Daniel's fists tightened. He had come searching for an end to the war, for meaning in the ruin around him. Now he found himself locked in a temple with the very ruler his people hated most, and with secrets that tied them closer than either had wanted. The shouts outside grew louder, footsteps pounding against the stone. The Queen's guards or his enemies, it didn't matter. The battle was coming back to them, and for the first time Daniel felt that the scar on his chest was not just a memory of pain, but the beginning of something far greater than himself. The sound of armored boots grew louder as soldiers rushed toward the temple. The echoes bounced against the ancient walls, a reminder that the war outside had not ended. Daniel turned his head toward the doors, every muscle in his body ready for another fight. But before he could act, the Queen lifted her hand and the runes carved into the walls flared with light. A barrier of shimmering energy sealed the entrance, cutting off the noise in an instant. Silence fell. Only the Queen's steady breathing and the faint hum of the barrier filled the space. Daniel stared at her, uncertain if she had protected him or trapped him. You do not belong in this war, she said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that made the hall feel smaller. Yet the mark has bound you to it. She walked past him, her steps slow but firm, and stopped before the great statue at the center of the temple. Her hand touched its stone surface and the entire room trembled. The statue's eyes glowed and Daniel felt his scar burn. He winced, pressing his hand harder against his chest. A surge of memory flashed through him. Fire, shadows, and a voice calling his name when he was just a boy. He had dismissed it as a dream, but now the voice seemed too real to ignore. The Queen looked back at him, her green skin glowing under the light. This temple is older than both our empires. Its heart held a power meant to awaken only in my line. But when the fire came, you touched it first. Her eyes narrowed. A human child who should never have been here. Daniel's breath caught. The pieces began to fit together, though the picture they formed unsettled him. You're saying this mark was meant for someone else, he said slowly, his voice low. For my blood, she answered. Her tone was sharp, but there was something softer beneath it, almost like grief. For a son who never returned, Daniel froze. The weight of her words pressed on him like the heavy stone above them. A son, her son. He wanted to deny it, to claim this was another alien trick, but deep inside, a part of him knew she spoke the truth. The scar was not random. His survival that night had not been chance. The Queen's eyes softened for just a moment. When I saw you, I thought the universe was mocking me. But the mark does not lie. Whatever the temple chose that night, it chose you. Daniel shook his head, disbelief etched across his face. I'm no prince. I'm no heir. I've fought my whole life just to survive. If this power was meant for someone else, then why hasn't it killed me already? Her gaze locked onto his. Because you are stronger than you know, and because the temple is never wrong. The hum of the barrier at the doors grew louder, shaking as soldiers outside tried to break through. Daniel glanced at the glowing seal and then back at her. Your soldiers won't wait forever. If they break in, they'll kill me. Her lips curved slightly, though it was not quite a smile. "They will not harm you. Not now." He frowned. "Why?" She stepped closer, so close that he could feel the warmth of her breath. Her eyes, bright and sharp, searched his face as though looking for the boy she had lost. Then she said softly, "Because if they kill you, they kill the last link to me, and even my enemies would not dare that." The words settled heavy in his chest. Daniel had spent years fighting the Empire, hating its rulers, dreaming of freedom from their grasp. Now he stood before its queen, hearing her call him something far more dangerous than an enemy, a symbol, a key. The barrier shuddered again, cracks of light splitting across its surface. The queen did not flinch. Instead, she lifted her hand toward Daniel's scar, her voice calm and final. "The war is no longer between our people. It is within you." The barrier cracked like glass under a hammer. Bright fissures spread across its surface as the soldiers outside struck again and again. Each impact made the runes along the temple walls flicker, as though the ancient power inside was running thin. Daniel's fists clenched. He was trapped, caught between a queen who spoke of destinies he never asked for and enemies who would not hesitate to cut him down. The queen did not move. Her eyes stayed fixed on him, calm in the face of danger, as though she knew something he did not. "When the barrier falls," she said evenly, "they will see you, and when they do, the mark will reveal itself. The question is whether you will run or stand." Daniel's throat tightened. All his life, survival had been his only rule. Fight when you must, escape when you can. But this was different. There was no escape from the scar that burned beneath his skin. He looked at her, seeing no fear in her face, only certainty. She believed in something he still couldn't. With a thunderous crash, the barrier shattered. Blinding light flooded the hall as armored figures stormed inside. Their weapons glowed, sharp and deadly, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The soldiers spread quickly, surrounding the temple's heart. Their leader raised a spear and shouted, "Protect the queen!" Daniel blinked in shock. Protect her? He had expected them to attack, to strike him down for even standing in her presence. Instead, every soldier dropped to one knee, their eyes fixed not on the queen but on him. The scar on his chest glowed brightly now, brighter than it ever had before, casting a red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Whispers rippled through the ranks, faces hardened, eyes widened, and the hall filled with uneasy silence. Daniel stepped back, confused and tense. "What are they doing?" he asked, his voice rough. The queen's gaze never left him. "They see the mark," she said softly. "And they know what it means." The leader of the soldiers lowered his head. "My queen, is it true? Has the heir returned?" Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. He opened his mouth to deny it, to tell them they were wrong, but the queen raised her hand, silencing him. Her expression was unreadable, torn between sorrow and power. She looked at her warriors, her voice carrying through the temple like thunder. "The temple has chosen. The mark has returned. And with it, the bloodline stands again." A roar of voices rose from the soldiers, a mixture of awe and fear. Daniel shook his head, refusing to accept what he was hearing. "No," he muttered. "I'm not your heir. I'm not even one of you." The queen stepped closer, her voice low but sharp. "Do you think the temple cares what you believe? Do you think destiny bends to your will? The scar chose you, Daniel. You cannot give it back." The soldiers shifted uneasily, their weapons still lowered, waiting for her command. Daniel felt trapped, his chest burning like fire, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break. He had come here as a soldier of a war, but now he stood in a place where war seemed smaller than what lay before him. The queen's eyes softened, her hand brushing the air above his scar without touching him. "You may not want this. You may hate what it means. But the truth is simple. You are tied to me, and the galaxy will not let us ignore it." Daniel's breath came heavy, the weight of her words pressing down harder than any battlefield. For years he had fought to define his own path, to live and die by his own choices. But now the universe itself seemed to laugh at the idea of choice. The soldiers before him waited like hunters before their king, and the queen beside him carried eyes full of secrets too deep to measure. In that moment, Daniel realized the war he thought he understood was only a shadow of what was to come. The temple floor felt colder beneath Daniel's boots as he faced the kneeling soldiers. Their armored heads bowed, their voices hushed in awe, and yet none of it made sense to him. He had never been anyone's heir. He had never ruled or commanded. He was just a man who had survived more battles than he should have. And now somehow that survival had chained him to a destiny that wasn't his. The Queen's eyes studied him, sharp and unyielding. She saw the doubt in his face, the way his hands trembled slightly at his sides. "You fear what this means," she said softly, her voice carrying to every corner of the temple. "But fear does not change truth." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Truth? My truth is that I fought against your empire. I've buried friends because of this war. Do you expect me to forget that because of a mark I never wanted?" The soldiers shifted uneasily, some lifting their eyes at his defiance. A few even tightened their grips on their weapons, but none moved forward. The Queen raised her hand, silencing the room again. "You think the mark makes you ours," she said, her tone heavier now. "But you do not understand. The mark does not belong to my empire. It belongs to something older, something neither human nor alien. That scar was meant to bind worlds together, not tear them apart." Her words echoed in his chest, confusing yet undeniable. Daniel wanted to argue, but the burning in his scar flared hotter, as though the mark itself agreed with her. He stumbled a step back, clutching it with a grimace. The soldiers murmured at the sight, whispers rising like smoke. The Queen moved closer, her silver hair glimmering in the dim light. Her gaze softened, almost sorrowful. "When I lost my son, I thought the seal was gone forever. But it chose you. Do you not see? The galaxy will not end this war until you understand why." Daniel's voice cracked as he forced out his reply. "I never asked for this. I never asked to carry your son's burden." Her eyes lingered on him, deep and searching.
"Perhaps not."
"But you carry it all the same. And whether you accept it or not, the war will follow you until the choice is made." The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Daniel looked at the soldiers, their armored figures waiting for command. They didn't see a human soldier anymore. They saw something else, something larger than life. And it terrified him. Finally, he turned back to the Queen, his voice raw. "If what you say is true, then tell me what this mark means. Tell me why it burns like fire every time I stand near you. Tell me why I feel like my life stopped being mine the moment I entered this temple." For the first time, her mask of authority cracked. Pain flickered in her eyes, a memory she had carried for decades. She reached out slowly, her fingers hovering just above his scar, because this mark was bound by blood. "And though you are not of my flesh, the temple tied you to me, to my line, to my loss." Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. The idea felt impossible, yet the scar pulsed beneath her words almost as if it was alive. Before he could reply, the ground shook. Dust rained from the high ceiling and a rumble echoed through the temple. The soldiers rose quickly, weapons drawn. The Queen's expression hardened, shifting back to command. "They've found us," she said, her voice sharp. Daniel's heart raced. He didn't know who they were, but from the way her soldiers tensed, it wasn't allies. Whatever force approached was strong enough to make even these warriors afraid. The Queen turned to Daniel, her green skin glowing faintly in the temple's light. "This is your choice," she said firmly. "Stand with me and face them, or walk away, and let the galaxy fall into fire." Daniel's scar pulsed once more, harder than ever before, as if the universe itself waited for his answer. The rumble grew louder until the ancient wall seemed ready to crack. Daniel's scar burned like fire under his skin, forcing him to grit his teeth. The soldiers stood in tight formation, their armor glowing faintly, ready for battle. The Queen raised her hand, her voice steady but commanding. "Hold your ground. They will come through the shadows." Daniel's instincts screamed at him to run, but he stayed. Some force stronger than fear rooted him in place. Perhaps it was the scar. Perhaps the Queen's words, or maybe the truth he had sensed since entering this temple. That everything in his life had led to this moment. From the broken doorway, shapes appeared. They were not soldiers of the Queen's empire, nor human troops. Their bodies were tall, twisted, and cloaked in darkness. Their eyes glowed with a sickly blue light, and their weapons hummed with unnatural energy. Daniel had never seen them before, yet something deep inside him recoiled as if it remembered. The Queen's soldiers whispered, fear cutting into their voices. "The forgotten, they should not be here." Daniel frowned, his heart pounding. "Who are they?" The Queen's jaw tightened. "The ones who burned this temple long ago, the ones who were supposed to be gone forever. They have returned for the seal." Her eyes flicked to his scar. "For you." The first of the creatures lunged forward, moving unnaturally fast. The Queen's soldiers met them with blades and spears, steel clashing with energy, sparks flying across the temple floor. Daniel stumbled back, his breath sharp. He had fought many battles, but these enemies moved like shadows, their strikes unpredictable, their presence suffocating. One of them broke through the line and rushed toward him. Its weapon hissed with blue fire raised high to cut him down. Daniel's body reacted before his mind did. His hand shot out, gripping the spear of a fallen soldier. As the creature swung, Daniel stepped forward, driving the weapon into its chest. The impact was like lightning. His scar blazed with light, flooding the hall with a red glow. The creature let out a piercing scream, its body dissolving into ash before it hit the ground. Daniel staggered, stunned. The weapon shook in his grip, his scar still burning. The queen's eyes widened as she saw it. "The seal awakens," she whispered. Another shadow lunged at him. This time Daniel did not hesitate. He swung the spear in a wide arc, the red glow following its edge like fire. The creature was torn apart, scattering into the air like smoke. Around him, soldiers shouted in shock, their morale rising at the sight. The queen stepped forward, her own blade flashing gold. She moved like flowing water, every strike precise, every motion a command of power. Yet her eyes often flicked to Daniel, as though the battle mattered less than the fire she saw blazing inside him. For the first time, Daniel felt something shift inside. He had always fought as a man desperate to live another day, but now, with the queen's soldiers at his side and the scar burning like a living force, he fought as though the battlefield itself had chosen him. Each strike was stronger, each movement guided by an instinct that felt older than himself. The shadow creatures faltered, their assault slowing. The soldiers pressed forward, their voices shouting in unison. The queen raised her hand, her voice rising above the chaos. "Push them back. The air fights with us!" Daniel froze at the words, anger and disbelief surging through him. He wanted to deny it, to reject the title she had given him, yet the glowing scar on his chest betrayed him, shining brighter every time he struck. The soldiers saw it. The shadows feared it, and deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was who he was meant to be. As the last of the creatures dissolved into the air, silence returned to the hall. The soldiers cheered, raising their weapons high. But Daniel stood still, his chest heaving, his mind storming. The queen lowered her blade, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She stepped closer, her voice low but unshaken. "You see it now, don't you? The seal chose you not to survive, but to fight." Daniel's scar pulsed once more as though answering her, and for the first time he could not deny it. The smoke of the fallen shadows still hung in the air, drifting like dark mist around the broken pillars. Daniel stood with the spear still in his grip, its metal hot from the battle. His chest glowed faintly where the scar pulsed, softer now but steady, as if reminding him it was alive. Around him, soldiers bowed their heads, whispering about the air, about prophecy, about destiny. But Daniel's mind was not on their words. His eyes locked on the queen. She had fought like a storm, precise and unshaken, but he had seen her eyes during the battle. They were not just proud or commanding. They were watching him, measuring him, as if she had been waiting for this moment for longer than he could imagine. He stepped toward her, his voice sharp. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? You brought me here because you knew the seal would wake." The queen did not flinch. She met his gaze calmly, her crown gleaming in the fading light of the runes. "I hoped it would. The temple does not lie. It chose you long ago. Tonight it proved what I already believed." Daniel's jaw clenched. "And what exactly do you believe I am? Your lost son? Your weapon? Or just another piece in your empire's war?" Her soldiers stirred uneasily at his tone, but she raised her hand, silencing them. Her voice was steady, but beneath it there was pain. "You are none of those things. And yet, you are all of them. The temple bound you to my line. That bond makes you more than a soldier. It makes you the key to ending what began long before your people or mine drew blades against each other." Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to reject her words, but the memory of the battle held him still. The way his scar had burned, the way the shadows had dissolved under his strike, it had felt too real, too powerful to deny. Still, he pressed her. "If that's true, then why didn't you stop the war before it started? If I've been tied to your line all this time, why did so many have to die?" Her eyes dropped for the first time, a shadow crossing her face. "Because I thought you were dead," she admitted quietly. "I thought the fire had taken you when the temple fell. I searched, but there was no trace. And so I fought the war alone. believing the seal was gone forever, until tonight, her honesty struck him harder than a blade. For a moment, the weight of her words pressed down on his anger, but then doubt returned, heavier than before. He narrowed his eyes. Or maybe you let the war continue because it gave you power. Maybe this is just another trick to control me. The Queen's soldiers tensed, some shifting their weapons, but she stayed calm. Her gaze sharpened, steel behind her sorrow. Believe what you will, human. But the mark does not bend to lies. It revealed itself in battle, not in my command. Do you think I could force the temple to choose you? No. It is older than both of us. Daniel turned away, his chest rising and falling with frustration. Her words made sense, yet trust was not so easily given. He had seen too much death, too much betrayal, to place his fate in the hands of a queen who had been his enemy. But as he looked at the soldiers, their faces filled with awe instead of hate, a new fear crept into him. They no longer saw him as human. They saw him as something else, something they might one day follow. That thought chilled him more than the battle had. The Queen stepped closer, her voice low, almost gentle. You cannot run from this, Daniel. The temple will call you again, and when it does, you must choose. Not for me, not for my empire, but for the galaxy. Her words echoed through the hall, mingling with the whispers of the soldiers. Daniel stood still, gripping the spear until his knuckles whitened. The scar on his chest pulsed in answer, and he knew deep down that she was right about one thing. The choice was coming. And there would be no turning back. The temple grew quiet after the battle. Only the faint hum of the runes filled the air, glowing weakly on the walls as if they were tired from holding back the shadows. Daniel stood near the broken statue, his hand resting on his chest where the scar still pulsed faintly. His breath had steadied, but his thoughts churned like a storm. The Queen moved toward the heart of the temple, her silver hair flowing like liquid light in the gloom. Her soldiers kept their distance, forming a silent circle around them. Daniel's eyes followed her every step, suspicion battling with curiosity. She stopped before a carved stone altar, her fingers tracing its ancient marks. This place was built long before empires, she said, her voice low but steady. It was not a temple of worship, but a vault. A vault to hold the seal you now carry. Daniel frowned, his grip tightening on the spear still in his hand. A vault? What was so important that it needed this? He tapped his chest, his voice sharp. Why bind it to me? The Queen's gaze lingered on the glowing runes as she spoke. The seal was not made to bind power. It was made to bind hunger. Long ago, the Forgotten tried to consume worlds. This vault held what they wanted most, the key to their return. When the fire came, the vault broke and the seal leapt to the first living soul that touched it. That soul was you. Her words sank into him like cold water. The shadows they had fought earlier, the Forgotten, were not new enemies. They had been waiting, buried in history, only to rise again. And he, by chance or fate, had become the wall between them and the galaxy. Daniel's chest tightened. So all of this, all the battles, all the death, it wasn't just about your empire or mine. It was about them. She turned to him, her green skin glowing faintly in the light. Yes, and neither your people nor mine ever knew the truth. They thought the war was for land, for pride, for survival. But beneath it all, the Forgotten waited. And now they smell the seal again. Daniel's hand pressed against his scar. The burn there was no longer pain alone. It was a warning. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then I was never meant to fight you. I was meant to fight them. A flicker of relief passed over her face, but it was quickly replaced with sadness. You begin to understand. But the galaxy does not. They will not believe. To them you are still human, still enemy. To me you are heir, and to the Forgotten, you are prey. He looked at the soldiers standing in silence, their armor reflecting the red and gold light of the runes. They seemed loyal to her, but their eyes kept drifting to him, filled with a mix of fear and reverence. It unsettled him deeply. Daniel turned back to the Queen, his voice rough. Then why not destroy it? Why not break the seal once and for all? Her eyes hardened, her tone sharper. Because to break the seal is to unleash what it holds. The power inside would burn through worlds until nothing remained. That is why it must stay bound to life. To you. Daniel shook his head, disbelief and anger mixing in his chest. You're telling me I'm nothing more than a cage? A prison for something too dangerous to release? Her silence was answer enough. The weight of her truth pressed down on him like stone. He had thought himself a soldier, then perhaps a symbol. Now he realized he was also a lock, a living vault chained to an enemy older than time. The queen's voice softened, almost pleading. Do not see it as a curse. See it as a purpose. You were chosen not by me, not by chance, but by the temple itself. Without you all falls. Daniel's breath grew heavy. His scar pulsed once more, the glow spreading faintly across the hall. He looked at her, his voice low, steady. Then what happens when the cage breaks? The queen lowered her head, her crown casting a shadow across her face. Then the galaxy burns. The queen's words lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Then the galaxy burns. Daniel stood still, his scar glowing faintly beneath his torn shirt, each pulse echoing in his chest like a second heartbeat. The soldiers whispered among themselves, glancing nervously toward the shattered doors as if they already felt the shadow of what was coming. The silence broke with a low rumble. The ground shook, dust falling from the cracked ceiling. Daniel's scar flared hot, warning him before the sound even reached the temple. A chorus of screeches filled the night, sharp and unearthly, carried on the wind. The Forgotten had returned, and this time there were many more. The queen raised her hand, her voice cutting through the fear. Shields. Form the line. Her soldiers obeyed instantly, armor clashing as they stood shoulder to shoulder. Blades and spears shimmered in their hands, glowing faintly with energy. Daniel gripped his weapon tighter, his pulse racing. The queen stepped forward, her silver hair glinting in the temple's dim light. She looked at him, her voice steady. The seal will not stay quiet now. It knows what approaches. Do not fight it. Let it guide you. He wanted to argue, to tell her he wasn't ready, but the temple shook again before he could speak. Through the shattered doorway poured shadows, dozens of them, their twisted forms rushing forward with claws of blue fire. Their eyes burned with hunger, fixed on Daniel as if nothing else in the hall mattered. The first wave struck like a flood. Soldiers braced, spears stabbing into the darkness, but the Forgotten fought with inhuman speed. Blades clashed, sparks lit the air. Screams echoed through the stone. Daniel spun as one lunged at him, his scar blazing to life. His body moved faster than thought, the spear in his hands glowing red with each strike. He swung wide, cutting through the shadow. It dissolved into smoke, vanishing into the air. Another came from the side, claws reaching for his throat. Daniel ducked, thrusting forward. The weapon pierced its chest, and the glow from his scar surged outward in a red wave, shattering the creature in an instant. He staggered back, breathless, but the power inside him kept pushing, demanding he fight more. The queen's voice rose above the battle. Heir of the seal, stand with us. The soldiers echoed her cry, their fear turning into fury. They pushed forward, emboldened by Daniel's strikes. He moved among them, every motion unnatural, guided by the scar's fire. He no longer fought like a man desperate to survive. He fought like a storm, each swing breaking shadows apart, each step pulling the line forward. But the Forgotten did not relent. More poured in, climbing over the fallen, their screeches piercing the night. Daniel's arms ached, sweat dripping down his face, but the scar drove him onward. Each pulse was stronger, hotter, as if it fed on the battle. He felt its hunger, its need to burn brighter, and it frightened him almost as much as the enemy. The queen fought beside him, her golden blade flashing like lightning. She moved with a grace that spoke of centuries of battle, but even she stole glances at him, watching the seal awaken with every strike. At one moment, their eyes met through the chaos. Her voice, soft but clear, reached him even over the noise. Now you see why you cannot run. Daniel gritted his teeth, driving his spear through another shadow. His scar pulsed so brightly it lit the hall, casting the soldiers in red light. The Forgotten shrieked, some faltering at the sight. The queen pressed the attack, shouting, "Push them back! Drive them into the night." Together they fought until the last of the shadows broke and dissolved, retreating into the darkness outside. The hall fell silent again, littered with ash and broken stone. The soldiers, exhausted and bloodied, raised their weapons in shaky triumph. Daniel dropped to one knee, his chest heaving, the glow of the scar dimming at last. He felt drained, but more than that, he felt afraid. Not of the shadows, but of himself, of the power that had answered when he fought. The queen approached slowly, her crown casting a faint golden light. She looked down at him, her voice steady, but her eyes carried something deeper. You are not a cage, Daniel. You are the weapon the galaxy has waited for, and soon it will need you more than ever. Daniel lifted his head, sweat dripping down his brow. He wanted to deny her, to throw her words back at her, but the scar burned softly in his chest, pulsing as though it agreed. The temple smelled of ash and blood. The soldiers, though victorious, leaned on their weapons, their breaths ragged. The stone floor was littered with the remains of the forgotten, their shadows fading into nothing. Outside the night was still, but Daniel felt no peace. His scar pulsed faintly, a reminder that the fight was not over. The queen stood tall, her crown gleaming faintly in the dim light, but her expression was heavy with thought. She looked at Daniel, not as a ruler gazing at a soldier, but as someone staring at the last piece of hope she dared to believe in. "You felt it?" she said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence. "The seal burns because the forgotten are not finished. They will come again in greater numbers, and when they do, only you will stand between them and the galaxy." Daniel rose slowly, wiping ash from his arms. His eyes narrowed, his voice rough. "All my life I've fought wars I never wanted. I buried friends, carried scars, and survived when I should have died. And now you're telling me it was never about those wars, it was about this." He tapped his chest, his hand pressing against the glowing scar. "This curse." The queen's gaze softened, her tone almost tender. "Not a curse, a gift. It was not meant for you, but it chose you. And in choosing you, it gave the galaxy another chance." Daniel looked at the soldiers around them. They no longer saw him as human. They saw the seal, the power, the heir of something far older than their queen. That thought weighed on him like a chain. "I never asked for this," he whispered. The queen stepped closer, her silver hair shimmering as it caught the light. She stopped only a breath away, her eyes bright and unyielding. "No one asked for destiny, but you lived where others fell. You carry what others could not. That is why the temple gave you the seal, and that is why I will stand with you until the end." Her words struck deep. For the first time, Daniel felt the fire inside him steady, no longer wild and untamed, but alive with purpose. He thought of the forgotten returning, of the galaxy torn apart in their hunger. If he walked away, everything he had fought for, every life lost in vain, would mean nothing. The soldiers knelt one by one, their voices rising as they called him heir, protector, chosen. Daniel's fists tightened at his sides. He had no desire for crowns, no hunger for thrones. But as he looked at the queen, he saw the truth. This was not about empire or power. It was about survival. Finally, he straightened his back and spoke, his voice steady, carrying through the hall. "I am not your heir. I am not your prince. I am a soldier. But if this seal means I'm the only one who can stop them, then I'll fight. Not for thrones, not for crowns, but for every world they would burn." The queen's lips curved into the faintest smile, her eyes shining with both pride and sorrow. "Then you are exactly what the galaxy needs." The scar pulsed once more, brighter than ever, as if sealing his vow. The runes on the walls flared in answer, casting the temple in radiant light. For a moment, the weight of destiny no longer felt like a chain, but like a weapon in his hand. Outside, the night remained still, but Daniel knew it would not last. The forgotten would return, hungrier and stronger. Yet for the first time, he did not feel afraid. The queen stood at his side, her golden blade gleaming. Her soldiers knelt before him, their faith unshaken, and the scar on his chest burned like a star, a promise carved into flesh. Daniel lifted his head, his voice calm but firm. "Then let them come." And for the first time, the galaxy had its answer.